Greetings, folk. Hallo. Good to have you here. Goeienaand. Ja, dag. Lekker dat julle hier by ons kom kuier hier by Legacy Conversations. Mind you, this is going to be a good one because there's a tournament on the go in the background somewhere, and everybody is all up in arms about what's going on at that tournament. The Cricket World Cup I'm talking about, yeah. But I've got Dr. Steve Scott here, and he's a rugby referee. So what the hell has this got to do with each other? Any case, Dr. Steve Scott, many of you will know of the older viewers. He has, I think, almost the highest views of all SAF videos. You can go look here. The card will pop in here. He was a Bosbok pilot, and he told us loads and loads about the fun and games he used to enjoy while in the operational area, and other places too. And off he went to one of the big airlines, and he flew there. But this is a man of many hats. He, as I say, was airline pilot, but he's also studied, and he is a lecturer at Coventry University, and that's why I say we have Dr. Steve Scott here. But he, as I've mentioned, he's a rugby referee. I also do know that he's an avid sports fan, all sorts of sports. He'll send me something on WhatsApp, and I'll say to him, oh, don't watch that, not interested. But he'll send it to me. But he knows about everything about sport. I'm telling you, there's not a sport on this planet that Dr. Steve Scott doesn't know about. So that's the point of this matter. We have a boffin here, and I'm proud to tell you that he's going to be telling us a little bit, for starters, about where his love for sport came from and why it was rugby. Welcome, Dr. Steve. It is great of you to come back. This is your third visit to Legacy Conversations, and may there be many more in the future. But for now, we're talking rugby.
Well, Fossey, what an introduction, eh? Sometimes when I listen to you talking about people, then I'm always sort of tentative to hear. Can't wait for you to stop talking so I can listen to that guy talking. But when you're talking about me, sometimes my brain goes, geez, did I do all of that? I can't believe it. But anyway, such is life, eh? So, what did you ask? Oh, where did I start? Where does sport start? I think, let's be honest, for us folks coming from where we come in our part of the world, we're very much outdoorsy type people. So I would imagine that most of us as kids always had a ball or a bat. And of course, then if you have a ball and a bat, then you've got friends, and therefore then you've got competition, and test matches then happen in the back garden virtually every day, every afternoon. So it's just one of those things. Now, in my case, I was born in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, but my folks were from Zambia, and so we lived in Kitwe, Zambia, and my dad was a big rugby guy. So all I can remember from years and years and years as a lighty, Tuesdays and Thursday nights we were at the club, mom, dad, myself, and it was practice, and then Saturdays was rugby, home and away. So it was that was our life for that, as long as I can remember as a young chokaki. And then of course, so when you're there during practice, there are other kids, and so there's always lots of other sport, rugby happening between all the different lighties of different ages and all that. And I suppose that's where my interest in sport. But I must say, my folks were also of that attitude to how do I put this? They had decided amongst themselves that they would rather have all the kids in the neighborhood at our house. That's where they could keep an eye on us. So my dad would make sure I had everything I had two of. So I had a couple of cricket bats, I had a couple of rugby balls, I had footballs, I had nets. We had volleyball nets, we had everything. We had this big swimming pool. And mom just made sandwiches all day. So it was kind of that kind of culture, I think. that I think most folks grew up with, or at least I did. And so for me, from a very young age, I always wanted to play with something. I always wanted to be busy, and I always wanted to be the best dude in my clan or whatever it was. I was a little bit smaller in stature, physically, developed a little bit later than other guys, but then I learned very quickly how to use that to my own sort of advantage. So yeah, I guess that's where it sort of really started. But to be very honest, I was very fortunate enough, and I was sent to Falcon College in Rhodesia at the time when Mr. Dougal Turner was the headmaster. And I was in they've got different houses there, and I was in Founder's House. And I'm not too sure if people know, but sort of in the 70s and 80s, most of the teachers in these Rhodesian schools were from the UK, England. And in my case, both my cricket and my rugby coach were ex-English international players. And I can remember like yesterday when the rugby coach, I think I was like 12 or 11 or 12. He took me by the scruff of the neck, and we went for a walk down the side of the one pitch after a game, and he said, "Listen, I think reality needs to be talked about here. We need to be responsible about a few things. You're not going to be the biggest guy in the team. But fortunately, you've got a couple of other skills that I think we need to develop. You had a good game in number 10 today, but I want you to play number 9. And I'm going to, the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to work on you." And basically that day he said, if I can remember, he said, "You've got to learn to pass with both hands from the ground. You've got to learn to kick with both feet." And he taught me how to tackle. And I think that was the main thing for the rest of my life. I was never, ever scared to tackle because I knew how to tackle and when to tackle. So for me, rugby was really good. And fortunately for me as well, was the ability to kick with both feet as a scrum half is vital. And that looks like on the selectors' pages, there's always a little box somewhere that says, "Can you kick with both with both feet?" And generally it worked out like that. So I was quite lucky. So I played rugby at Falcon, and we played against all the other big schools in Rhodesia and 1 or 2 other schools from South Africa where they toured, but we weren't allowed to tour down to South Africa, but they came up. And we played a couple of other teams in other, like Zambia and Mozambique and things like that. So we had in our year, we were quite lucky because we had a really good number 10 and 15 and quite a good front row. So we were pretty much becoming one of the better teams in Rhodesia at the time. And I think if I had stayed at Falcon for my matric year, my last year, I think we would have been probably the champions of the champion school. And then we would have been invited to go down to, perhaps we would have been invited to go down to the Craven Week and so on and so forth. But unfortunately for me, when I got to my second last year of school, towards the end of last year, second last year end of school, my folks decided to, we were forced off the farm that we had, and there were a couple of atrocities happening. And then my dad said, "Right, that's it, that's enough." And then we all left down to South Africa, and we had a grandparent that lived in Klerksdorp. And then so I did my matric year there, and that's where I started to learn about these big Afrikaner boertjies. That was like when you tackle them, it was like tackling a tree. It was really a huge education for me, and that's where I learned. Back to my previous coaching, what he said to me, he said, "I don't want you to go into contact. We can't afford you to get injured, so you must make sure that you're fast enough to get around somebody." if you can't get around, kick the ball and then run around or something like that, or pass or whatever it is. But I don't want you to go into contact. Only contact you do is if you are tackling, and you only tackle in X, Y, and Z situations. Anyway, when I got to South Africa, I realized that is more true than anywhere else, because these boertjies from these other schools were unbelievable, really hard. Anyway, then I went to the SAF, the Air Force, during Pube's course. And that we didn't play much rugby. We did play a little bit here and there, but not much, because you were on course on that. And then after SAF, I got myself posted down to, I first went to Potch to fly Bosbooks, as you know. But we were so busy there that I didn't get to play much rugby, but I did play rugby in Potch. And that was quite lekker. I was playing for the army team, actually. We had quite a good army team there. And fortunately for us, we were allowed into the Kooshuisliga in Potch, which was sublime, absolute sublime rugby, fantastic stuff. And then a couple of years later, after Boisies, I was then sent down, or I got posted down to Cape Town to fly albatrosses and dacks. And then while I was there, I started to play for, well, initially I started to play for Villages Rugby Club, because I stayed in Claremont. But then I got into the Southern Air Command team, the SAF Southern Air Command team. And we had, I don't know if you remember, we had these beautiful fields in Wynberg. You know, the fields in Silvermine were like a beautiful, you know, the mountain right next to you. But Wynberg was absolutely stunning, right there near one military hospital. It was also very good, because then if you got injured, you could quickly just walk across the road, you know, so it was quite lekker. But yeah, I played for Air Command for three and a half years. And then that was very lekker rugby. We played all the different forces, and the police force, and a couple of the local clubs, particularly up north of Cape Town, and a couple of clubs from the Boerland. So that rugby was probably the best rugby that I ever played, by far the hardest as well, but very, very lekker rugby indeed. I played 9 all my career in the SAF and in club rugby, and once or twice played fullback because I could kick from both feet, but I was far too small for that. After the SAF, I decided after a while it was actually a little bit too far for me to travel, and we traveled a lot. We had a lot of games, and that I couldn't do all of that. Then I went to play back for Villages for a season. I was playing second team there. I couldn't get into the first team, and then I got this chance to play at False Bay Rugby Club. At the time, there was probably won't use his name. There was now a very well-known Springbok coach that was coaching there at the time. And so I got this option to go and play there, and that was the best thing I could have ever done. This guy knew, no wonder he was a coach, and probably still one of the better coaches we've ever had. He knew exactly what he wanted and how to do things, and that it was fantastic. So the 2 years I played at False Bay were absolutely amazing, and we did very well. We lost the Shield. But the league we won against all odds. We won the league, so that was fantastic. Really a good year, the 2 years that I was there. Yeah, and then as per usual, I just turned 30. I remember it was my birthday about 2 weeks before that, and I got myself into a really silly situation, and I broke my shoulder. I'd never really had any serious injuries, you know, the odd little nick here and there and whatever it was, a couple of cuts, especially on the eyebrows. You know, of course, in those days, guys like yourself that played flank and that, they were allowed off the scrum, and the number one target was either 9 or 10. So I relied heavily on my 6 and 7 to protect me, but they couldn't always do it, and so it was always my face that got nailed somehow. I don't know what it was, but that's the way it works, eh? Anyway, I broke my shoulder, and then my wife said to me, "That's it. No more rugby. You've done it. You've had a great time. Now you're going to take up gardening or whatever it is. And so that's kind of what happened. And then around about, I don't know, it wasn't long. It was about 7 or 8 months. I was getting so frustrated. And my wife even came back one afternoon from somewhere and she said, listen, you're a pain in the ass. Can you not get back into rugby? I don't want you to play, but can't you go and do something? Coach or bloody, I don't know, do something, because you need to get out of my hair. You're not, it's not out of your blood yet. And then she said later that day, she said, listen, you were the biggest mouth on the field and you always used to complain about the referee. Why don't you get into refereeing? And, I thought, yes, that's not a bad idea. And so yeah, that's it. So that's how I sort of transpired into reffing. By then, we had moved from Cape Town to Dubai, and I started my refereeing career in Dubai, actually. And I was just very, very lucky to be there at the time, and so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, that's basically my rugby playing days. And then, of course, I got into refereeing. And I suppose when you talk about refereeing, what people don't, I don't know if everybody knows about it, but when you talk about refereeing, there's a whole bunch of courses that you need to go to. And I think I've got a slide there where you can probably see some of them. And there's so I've done, as far as refereeing is concerned, I've done level 1 and level 2 and level 3 refereeing courses. Level 3 refereeing courses are generally the minimum requirement for an international referee, so you have to do that. And I was very lucky because I was in Dubai at the time. It was a new sort of thing in Dubai. Started by an ex-South African chap by the name of Bert Reynolds, by the way, who was very keen on his rugby. And at the time, we had a new IRB manager, training guy, by the name of Jared Gallagher. He was a Kiwi based in Hong Kong. And at the time, I came out of the woodwork. He was appointed, and he came to Dubai one day, and we got on very, very well. And my career in officiating just flew on from there. So he got me onto these different courses. I started off by doing courses in Dubai, and then I went down back to Cape Town to make sure I did the basic one there again. And then my courses were done in Scotland and in Ireland, the UK, and then all over the show. And then and I'll talk about that a little bit later, I then also moved into sighting, which is also another part of rugby, as we'll discuss a bit later. And again, I then became an educator, an IRB educator. So a referee trainer and a sighting commissioner trainer, and then eventually a coach, as it were. So yeah, I've been very lucky as far as where I've been I've been just at the right place at the right time, really. Not due to any of my spectacular abilities, but I've had a little bit of ability but the timing has been right. That I've just been in the right place at the right time. So as far as my reffing is concerned, just to put a bit of background into it, it started off because I was a pilot, and we were flying all over the world. Within a 2 and a bit year period, I managed to arrange to become a member of the different refereeing unions around the world. So, for example, I was a member of the English Rugby Union, the RFU, the French Rugby, all the referee unions. The French Union, of course, Dubai, South Africa via Cape Town, by Patron, who's down in Cape Town, who's now just retired. And then, of course, Singapore, Japan, even China, Australia, New Zealand. So I was a paid member, and I had to make sure that I need to get to those countries X amount of times per year to referee a game, a certain amount of games to keep my qualification, or whatever you want to call it, in those countries. So in that first couple of years, that was my main goal, was just to referee any game, anywhere. And I managed to be able to, for example, bid for any, after a while, you knew that on certain places, the universities play on a Wednesday night. Sometimes they play on a Friday night. Stellenbosch, of course, they've got their Koos on a Friday, so I always wanted to be there. Most countries have got a Saturday morning, 11 o'clock, 11:15 schools game, and then of course the league or whatever you want to call it, the men's in the afternoon. So I would bid for Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays to any of the rugby destinations, and then I'd send my roster to those referee unions. And every single time that I went anywhere, I was lucky enough to get a game. So I was very lucky as far as that was concerned. I was known as the pilot, have whistle, will travel. And what was really good for me, I think, now in hindsight, I was kind of an independent guy from outside. So a lot of the more contentious games, the derbies, the ones that there were always, big punch-ups or fights the previous game or whatever it was, I seemed to get all of those. Which, of course, in the beginning, I thought, geez, man, everybody's fighting nowadays. But anyway, towards the end, I learned how to manage that. And so I was very fortunate. Sure, I don't know. Okay, I'll tell you a little bit about the more sort of the highlights. During this sort of time period, we had a big, like they still have, we had the Dubai Sevens tournament, which is basically 5 tournaments in one, including the IRB section. And so from the days when I started off there, I got involved in running touch and running referees in sort of the lower leagues. But after the third or fourth time, I was quite lucky to do the international, not the IRB, but the international final, which was, funny enough, it was between a league and a rugby union, the rugby league and rugby union, 2 British sides. And it turned out to be a cracking game of rugby. Based on that, I was then invited to referee in the RB section the following year, which was quite good because I managed to referee a couple of years in the Dubai Sevens. And then from there, through Jared Gallagher and the IRB and all the various referee assessors, I managed to qualify, and I got to, I can't remember all of them, but I did, in 1 year, I did quite a good game down in Cape Town on the weekend. It was South Africa under 20s, England under 20s. And then the very next 2 weeks later, I did the Kenya Sevens in Nairobi, did the final there. And then about 3 weeks later was the Dubai Sevens. I managed to do a couple of RB games there. And then 2 weeks later, or a couple of weeks later, was the Amsterdam Sevens, which I did the final there. And then during that period, I was also doing Hong Kong 10s and Hong Kong 7s. And I even got to do the Kowloon 10s final. Refereed at the 10s, at the 7s. So it's been a very, how can I say, fortuitous time of my life where rugby just blossomed in Dubai at the time, and I was there, and I managed to jump on the horse, or on the wave, as it were. So as far as refereeing is concerned, yes, I love the Sevens tournament, and I managed to do a couple of Dubai Sevens tournaments and other tournaments all over the show on the Sevens circuit. I would say Hong Kong is probably still the best as far as rugby is concerned, and party and vibe. Although at the time I also went down to Wellington in New Zealand, and that was a fantastic tournament as well, although it's not there anymore. But people do say to me that this year is the last Hong Kong in the old stadium, by the way. So if people are thinking of an event to go to, I would say go this year before it disappears. It's early next year. And then, of course, if you really enjoy it, the Sevens down in Cape Town, what was it, 4 years ago, I went to, was a sublime event. Absolutely amazing event that. But just to get back to myself, I loved these big events. Very addictive. Once you've done one final, you want to do more and more and more. but I also really enjoy 15-man rugby. And for me, to be able to fly down to Cape Town, do the Koos Liga on a Friday night in Stellenbosch, where there's 2 referees, by the way, and then you have a beer with the refs and with all the players later afterwards, and then on Saturday morning do one of the schools games, the high school games in Cape Town, and then that afternoon doing a club game. So for me, that would be a wonderful weekend of rugby, lots of washing of clothes and getting your boots clean and dry and all that kind of thing. So that was the kind of, for me, was one of the highlights. I always used to beg, borrow, steal, and Ben would eventually relent and then say, yeah, okay, come, I've got a couple of games for you. And then I'd shoot down and go to Cape Town and go and have a wonderful weekend. But also I was very good. I was very lucky. Sorry, not good. I was very lucky here in the UK. The very first game that I was appointed was a school game, a high school game, up here in Rugby, actually, not at Rugby, but next door. Beautiful old building, 14th century building, with the rugby field out the front. 2,500 people for the UK, unbelievable. And it was a quarterfinal game or something like that. And for some reason, I just decided these kids are going to run today. I'm not going to blow the whistle. It's going to be lots of advantage. I told them I'm not going to blow the whistle unless I really have to, and I didn't. And they ran. Anyway, unbeknown to me, the England referee selector was there. His kid was playing, but he was also there, and I was just lucky that he decided to put in a report for me. So I went straight from that school game onto the panel, which was quite amazing. And so I was very fortunate that I sent my roster in, and then I get appointed games. And I must say, refereeing in the UK, I've got to say, I've refereed in outer Mongolia. I've refereed in Kazakhstan. I've refereed in New Plymouth, New Zealand. I've refereed in the borders regions of Scotland, but Manchester, UK is the coldest place in the world. And on a good day, there could be 5 matches on 3 fields. And it could be foggy all day and ice all day, and yet somehow the game still goes. And I loved that. It was wonderful for me to leave a very hot, humid Dubai, fly through to the UK, and it's freezing cold and ice and snow, but very heartfelt rugby. And then, of course, the best thing about the UK refereeing, not the best, but one of the good things is that in the UK, the pubs have a referee's tipple, a jug, a mug, which hangs up. And so when you've refereed the game, you just go and grab your mug, and you can have free beer the whole night. So that's one of the draw cards of being a referee. And like I've said to you before, if you add in the fact that it's a good idea to always have the home team win, then of course things go a lot better in the pub afterwards. So yeah. So I would say, Fosi, I've just been lucky to be in the right place at the right time. I've also used my job to its advantage to get around. But now that I look back, I've been very fortunate to be involved where I've been involved, and I've got on my phone nowadays, like for example today, I can't tell you how many people are WhatsApping me because of the game this weekend. And that's because of all my refereeing contacts around the world. Truly fortunate. Truly fortunate. So I've been talking a hell of a lot. Is there anything else? Any other news that you want to talk about?
Well, let me put it this way. You've answered one question which I was quite keen about. Why did you want to become a referee? Well, you were told to go get out of the house. So we've answered that one. The point now, which leads me on to the next step, would you then, once your refereeing days are over, think of going into administration? I don't really. If you don't feel like answering that, that's fine to me too, because we have to get to the next sort of segment of this. Now that you've answered, I've just talking about the sevens. There's one of the slides that you sent me that looks like you're refereeing a South African team there.
Yes.
Was that not frowned upon, that a South African referees a South African team? Question mark. So there's a double dose for you.
Okay, Minyo. So I'll start with the second question and then I'll go back to the first one. Yes, I think you're talking about the one where Sonatla just scored and I was the referee that day. Yes, I was quite lucky because, again, I was fudging the system. When I registered as an IRB player, I had a look to see which countries are doing well. And England had Ben Gollings, but he was on the way, he was getting to the end of his career. But South Africa were coming up big time. And so I used my British passport to register as a Brit referee, but I registered as a UAE referee, but with a British passport. So in that way, they couldn't stop me from refereeing a final. And then what I was quite lucky with is on that particular day, the other referee that was far better than me was a Kiwi. And so they were playing against New Zealand, and so he couldn't referee. But I was a Pommy from UAE, so I could referee. But anyway, that's how it worked. So does that answer your question as far as that's concerned? I hope so. But getting back to the administration side of it, I think what we should do is quickly take a step back and just look at what are referees, what is this refereeing thing? What does it mean? So I'll talk to you a little bit about as a trainer, as it were. So let's take a step back and say, what is this rugby all about? Well, we've got what they call principles of the game, and we've got principles of the laws, and then we've got kind of roles of the referee. So that's the kind of structure I'll talk about, if that makes any sense. And so when you talk about the principles of the game, basically it's designed to be and written out to be a sport for everybody, all shapes and sizes, all sexes and approaches, and so on and so forth. It's also a game that relies on good conduct and on integrity. So these are principles that are central to the fabric of the game, because rugby is generated through honest and fair play. Without that, there's going to be some sanction of some sort. So that spirituality and that role that all of those attributes play, that breeds solidarity, camaraderie, and that's what rugby is all about. It's about a sport for all and using your integrity to gain that solidarity. And that's what makes rugby very different to most other sports. I would think that most people that have played rugby understand the value of discipline, the value of responsibility, the value of grinding it out, and being a man or being a person, being honest, being able to say on the day that I wasn't up to it, or whatever it is. And for me, as much as a lot of the refereeing and rugby coaching and rugby players I've worked with, it's made a huge difference to their life, their general outlook on life. So if we talk about the principles of laws, and I'm hoping here that you will put a slide up and a link I've put up for you, where people that are watching this can go and download the 2003 laws book and maybe have a page through that, so that when you are watching your sport on TV, or especially watching the other tournament that's not the cricket, maybe you'll be able to dive into the book and check out what the referee has said, if it's right or not so right. anyway, in this book, you'll see there's principles of the laws. Mainly, it's about maintaining the identity of the game. So you have these two teams observing fair play according to these laws by carrying, passing, kicking, and scoring as many points as the other team. And so when you look at rugby, now I'm not talking about only rugby per se union, but league and that it's all, you can see it's a very distinct type of sport. Now, union has got its own laws, and that's why it's particularly different to the rest of the fraternity. And so these laws are designed so that players can play safely, that they can have a good game, and they can entertain people that are watching. But it's also about the business end of it, which is contest, and it's also about continuity, keeping the game going. So these are how the laws that were designed early, sort of in the 1880s, 1890s was when the first law paper came out. The laws are continuously tweaked, updated to make sure that everybody's in the game is enjoying it, but there's still plenty of competition. So that's basically what the law is all about. Now, getting back to what I was saying early on, to tie that all in with the referee. So where does the referee sit in all this? Well, that's what the referee is there for, to try and to enforce that law, but also to be proactive. So the referee is there to try and make the game flow and keep that continuity going within a safe environment. Now, that's because that is where the step up from sort of club level rugby to the provincial level or the area level up to international. That's the big difference, is that ability to keep that continuity going, as it were. And with that comes discipline. So that's where the law comes in. Theoretically, the players will know the law. They will know how to apply the law, especially in the higher ranks of rugby. And the referee is only there to enforce the transgressors, as it were. The rest of the time, the ball must carry on. The game must go. One aspect that's a little bit overlooked, I would say, is one of the roles of the referee in the law is equity. So the referee is there to provide equal opportunity for both teams throughout the match. That is particularly important when it comes to safety. I'll give you an example. When you've got a very powerful scrum, in rugby, when you engage a scrum, the both front rows or the scrum packs have to take the hit and then settle down. But if one is totally overpowering, then it becomes a safety issue. So that equity then needs to be discussed, or plan B needs to be made, so that that environment remains safe. So what does the referee have to do? Well, they have to know the laws inside out, upside down, and every year they go through a whole bunch of courses, like I've just we saw earlier on. And every year you have to refresh yourself with exams, and if you're in some sort of a panel, there's always a couple of meetings through the year where they will get a whole bunch of referees together, and the trainers of the day, the coaches of the day, will spend the day with them, updating new ideas and things like that. Just about every tournament I've been to, there's been at least a couple of hours of the tournament director will find the sidekick that's going to be in charge of the referees, and that person will come and tell us how they want us to referee within the laws, but this particular tournament. So X, Y, and Z, we want them to do this and this and that and this. So that's one way for referees to keep up to date. Do all your law stuff and do all your studies, but go to tournaments and listen and learn. One very interesting thing about refereeing is that I've never, and I've traveled all over the world, I've never been to a place where other referees have kept kept the whatever the ideas to themselves, or they've been selfish with information. Everybody in the refereeing world wants to help each other. Everybody does help each other. Everybody supports each other. Many times you might come off the field at halftime and you might be like saying, this game's not going that well, and you're thinking, what can I do about it, and so on and so forth. And somebody will pop out the woodwork and might say, hey, listen, maybe you need to think about this and that, and I'll buy you a beer afterwards. And Stru's nuts. You just need that sort of outside lateral thinking. So yeah, it's one of those things. I think the biggest thing about refereeing is knowing your rules and regulations, the laws. But of course, you've got to keep fit, because number one, you've got to be in position. You have to get into this position to see the first transgressor, and then decide what's gonna happen. And so that's it. Besides all of that, refereeing is about enjoying the game and enjoying the involvement. And I think as a number 9 on the field, I think the next best position is the referee, because you can take shortcuts, much like you did as a number 9. And so for me, it was quite a logical transition and a very enjoyable transition. So yeah, that's it. That's all if you want me to talk a bit more about that side of things, please let me know. But I think that's enough for people. Otherwise, they'll get a little bit bored and they won't want to watch the rest of the video.
Steve, thank you very, very much. I think now that you mention all of these things, one realizes just what goes into. You can't just pitch up there with your whistle and your boots and off you go. It's all the preparation. And one thing that I did that sort of did come to mind while you were telling us about your rise in the refereeing ranks there, did you have referees that you looked up to that were sort of your role models, or did you just from the word go have to go on your own because of your situation that you were in Dubai and you were flying all over the place?
Yes and no. Of course, at the time, I was quite lucky. From 1995 upwards, the World Cup, I was sort of in my rugby. It was my rugby time of my life, and so I got to know all of those referees that did the World Cups in the different tournaments that I was involved with. I was very fortunate enough to get to know the referees that even did the finals. So I would say that most of those referees at the time, particularly the South African referees and one or two others, were guys that we would look up to for sure. And I'm thinking of guys like Andre Watson, for example, who we got to come to Dubai, and he gave us a bit of a training event and so on and so forth at a international high school event. So he was somebody that I could look up to, and I had a good chat to him about the mental preparation going into games. And he was very good about explaining all sorts of things, and to this day we're still in contact, and he shares information with us, and at the time when he was around was Jonathan Kaplan, and Jonathan's been fantastic to us as well, and a plethora of other guys. So yes, we've been very lucky to be rub shoulders with these guys, not at their level, of course not, but we could sponge off them. And so we were very lucky, or I was particularly lucky because I was in that time frame. I didn't mention that I forgot to mention actually that I also got involved in citing, and in my citing fraternity, I was quite lucky enough to get involved all the way to the top as far as that's concerned. So I have cited at the World Cup 7s and 15s, but also the Junior World Cup. So, for example, I did the Junior World Cup in Wales in 2008, I think it was, and at that tournament, all of the present referees, all the referees that were there at that time, are now all the top referees in the world now. So most of them are now at the World Cup, Wayne Barnes and co. And we were all sort of drinking buddies at that tournament. So we all on the phone to each other, and so I think we're their biggest fans and their biggest critiques. A guy like Nigel, for example, he started in Dubai. That's where he made his name all those years ago, and now he's got his own sort of Emirates podcast on the weekends, just after the weekends with his comments, and as you can see, very, very astute, one of the best referees ever in history, and we grew up at the same time, and he's helped us with many occasions. So I wouldn't say one person, but yes, certainly a lot.
For a person that stepped away from rugby, really, like myself, to see the development through those stats is quite amazing. Will you tell us, the layman, a little bit more about how you guys at professional level, and also not only at professional level, but the lover of the game, how you see the development over this past time?
Yeah, Fossi, there's a lot to talk about, and it'll take us hours. But what I will do is I have some data for you, which we can look at to sort of explain or show how maybe the game has changed. I would imagine that most of us can say rugby union has changed unrecognizably as a sport from the first time the Test match was played, in 1871, I think it is, and especially since professionality came into being from 1995. Now, there are some other clever people that have collected data in the World Cup, and we can look at some of these aspects. How has the game changed? Well, the first one that we could probably talk about is there's more ball in play time. As you can see there, from 1987 down in New Zealand to 2019, just the other year, a huge amount of time, from 28 minutes to almost 34.5 minutes. That's an incredible amount of time that the ball is in play. That, by the way, was one of the main reasons why television are spending so much money on rugby, because they want the ball in play, and that's why they want the sevens particularly. There's a lot more running and a lot more ball in play. That's why they want that in the Olympic Games. Let's move on to the next one, because we can talk about why the ball's in play for hours, but I'll come back to that. The numbers of set-piece scrums and lineouts has also decreased tremendously. It's plummeted. Much is actually made about the time taken to complete a set-piece in the modern game, particularly the scrum. And if you remember back to the early editions of the Rugby World Cup, the scrum was actually mainly a means of restarting the game. But now it's become a far more important, more tactical process in the modern game. And so it's become an attacking phase, particularly with the fact that now everybody has to stand 5 meters behind. So that gives that space as well. So if we have a quickly look at this, there's lots of detail here, but I won't go into too much. If you look at the sheer volume of scrums and lineouts in the early edition of the Rugby World Cup, it's actually reduced the amount of play time in the game. So, for example, in 87, there were 77 scrums and lineouts, and so far less opportunity for ball in play. Another sort of clear trend we can see from this graph is the consistent increase in lineout success rate. So from 87 to 95, we're going from between 68 and 73 of all lineouts were retained by the throwing inside, which has jumped to over 80%. So from 70 to 80% in that time span. And that was mainly due to the lifting that had been legalized, of course. And then, of course, since 1989, is it over there? We can see that the line-out success rate has sort of remained at around about 80%. Last year, it went up to 91%. So far this year, it looks like it's the same. the lineouts are becoming a very jealously protected environment. Getting back to the scrums, it's also changed a heck of a lot as well. The success rates have stayed remainly the same, but repeated tweaks to the laws at the scrum probably could go a long way to explaining why the number of scrums penalties has risen and fallen over the years. That's mainly due to World Rugby trying to create a safer and quicker environment, quicker scrums, while still maintaining that fight for possession. I think all of us at the moment are probably a little bit, confuzzed about the throw-in. But I suppose that's the way it is at the moment. The number one aspect is to get the ball in and out as soon as possible. To me, the more they do that, the more they're going to become closer to rugby league. So they need to be very careful on that. We can talk a little bit about another aspect we can talk about is tackles, carries, and rucks. There's far more tackles nowadays, far more carries, and far more rucks than ever before. In the sort of professional era of Rugby World Cup, sort of the average team made around about, as you can see there, around about 134 carries and tackles per game. In the last sort of 2 World Cups, it's been well over 200. So almost twice as much carrying the ball, tackling, etc., etc. You can also see the total number of rucks in a game has risen dramatically. And as we know, the breakdown has become a major focus in today's game, especially going to be this weekend, that's for sure, especially in the top games. We saw that with the France-South Africa game, which was a bit of a lottery because it depended where the referee was standing, but a lot of the penalties came from breakdown. Of course, with the ball carrying and the rucks, the same has happened in tackle success. That's also risen over the years. With these 9 editions of Rugby World Cup, it's gone from around about 70% of attempt tackles, now well over 80% tackles. And as you know, every player has got a little goody McGaff on the back of his collar, and that's measuring a whole lot of data. And that's one way they can keep a tab on just exactly how many tackles a player makes. And you will see last weekend that some of the South African players, particularly up in the front, they've got success rates of way over 90%, which is amazing, on first-time tackles. So all of this has helped or forced or encouraged players to become faster, to become bigger, to become fitter. It's not like in the olden days where there were a lot of mismatches on the field. Nowadays in modern rugby, everybody's faster, everybody's fitter. Forwards are as fast as backs. It's harder for players to exploit gaps in the defensive line nowadays. The days of running over somebody are like Jonah Lomu, that seems to have disappeared. Still happens, but the defense has stepped up tremendously. I think the big challenge in the last couple of years is this greater line speed to snuff out early attacks, and increasing the general play from a depth, and being ready to turn over a ball in open play and use it to advantage. I think that's become a stalwart, particularly in South Africa's game and particularly in New Zealand. They seem to focus a lot on that. Another aspect we can think about is the kicking game itself. Now, of course, this is a bugbear for a lot of people, and you'll see from 87 to 2019, the box kicking has increased tremendously. Tutorial has been sort of roughly the same in the last half. Touch kicks have gone up tremendously, and then of course all sorts of other kicks have been more or less the same. But box kicking has gone through the roof, and a lot of rugby pundits don't think it's that attractive, but it is a very attacking form of play, as long as you've got your support players doing what they're supposed to be doing. We've got to be honest. Defense now, some teams, that's their main line of attack is their defense, and one way to work that out is to use a couple of up and unders, box kicks, and to make sure that your players are there when the ball comes down, to put them under pressure. And hopefully, if you put them under pressure, especially if you've got more than one or two players there, then you can share the role, as it were, and one will be definitely going for the ball and forcing the penalty. And then another sort of statistic they talk about is what they talk about playing the percentages. And if you have a look at turnovers and offloads from 87 to 2019, there's a lot less turnovers conceded nowadays. Players are far more aware of the laws. The referees and the players have been working a lot together over the last couple of years. And so there's a lot less penalties or turnovers conceded. But also likewise, offloads are also a problem. So the days of Sonny Bill Williams coming through and offloading and the outside partner going to score untouched, that doesn't happen that much, because the defensive lines coming from rugby league, the defensive coaches have closed up lots of those gaps. So the offloads are not it's one of the statistics that have gone the way that we probably would like to see the other way. And then you also asked me, have players adapted? I had a quick look. There's an interesting study from Imperial College in London that did some studies on just how much rugby players have changed since the 1950s. And this was basically taken from all the players at the different Rugby World Cups and internationals, all the demographics that they have to put in. And these guys at Imperial did the study, and quite amazing that the body mass and height of players in the first game in sort of the Five Nations in 1955 and 65. And then if you have a look towards the right-hand side of the graph in the Six Nations, you can see that the sort of the average body mass, for example, was around about 84 kilograms, 85 kilograms in 1955. And then in 2015, that had risen to over 105 kilograms. So you're talking from 85 to 105, that's like 25% increase. It's incredible. You would imagine that most of the 1950s, 60s rugby players would be dwarfed by their modern counterparts. So that's a good example. And then you talk about, or you asked a bit about the evolution of the rugby player. Why is that so? I suppose we could say, the demands of rugby are that they are faster, that they are fitter, that they are stronger. Being a big dude is no longer just enough. Rugby itself has evolved into a sport of kind of hyper fit players, which continuously push the boundaries, as it were. So how's that happened, and why has it happened? Well, when we talk about it back at headquarters, the rules are constantly tweaked to keep that ball in play, and to keep the game fair, as it were. A big change has been nutrition. Rugby players are no longer weekend warriors that play just to drink beer in the pub. They actually, believe it or not, they eat better now. They've the top boys, when you get to anything sort of county sort of size and higher, players have their own sort of tailored nutrition plans. Even here in the UK, when I joined Australia as a referee, Within a couple of weeks, I was given a questionnaire, and I was then a couple of weeks later got myself a tailored nutrition plan menu recommending how much protein and how much carbo and all that kind of thing I had to take and keep my weight at a certain level. So yeah, I think if you think that the average male, we're talking about muscle building nutrients, as it were, like protein. So the average male probably takes in around about 50 grams, 50, 55, 60 grams of protein per day, which will be way too little for a big 100-kilogram chip playing rugby. They will need at least 200 to 300 grams of protein. So nutrition is vitally important for players, and you've played yourself, Fossey, you know that if you look after your body from the internal, it'll look after you out on the field as well. I think also that the professional game has meant players have spent a lot more time in the gym. They can also spend a lot more time on what they eat. They can also spend a lot more time on where they go and what other sports they do. So when we talk about strength, we do know that players have increased in size and power. So for example, in 95, I think it was, the average size of an English team player was, average weight, I think, was 92 kilograms, I think it was. And then, so in 2014, that was 105 kilograms. That's average. I'm not too sure about the average players this weekend, but I think it would be even higher than that. I also dived down into some of the data that the Kiwis, the New Zealanders, sent me about weight and that. So they've got, what did they say? Let me just see. Oh, yeah, they said between 1947 and 2015. So that's 47 to 2015. That's almost 70 years. The average weight and height of players has increased by 6.9 centimeters and 20 kilograms. And even since 1985 to 2015, there's been 2 centimeters higher increase and 15 kilograms increase. So the Kiwis have been keeping a tab on that. Now, why is that? Does that mean that other guys have fallen by the wayside? It's just all about strength and conditioning. That's all it really is. Yes, it has attracted bigger, faster, fitter guys particularly in the back line, but up in the forwards, it's the same hard players, but they're far fitter and stronger, better conditioning. What about how about the big, let's call it the largest neck guys on the field, the front row? If you look at New Zealand's data, the average All Black prop weight has gone up something like 25 kilograms since the 50s. So they're a lot heavier, but they're also a heck of a lot faster and stronger, as it were. Or no, maybe not stronger, but faster, and they have a lot more endurance than they may have not had in the past. So yeah, I think another issue of how the rugby players evolved is the how can I say, the effect of that tackling I mentioned earlier on. The successful tackle rate in Six Nations rugby this year was 80%. Now, if you think about that, that means there's a lot more pressure on everybody to perform better because the defenses have become so good as well. One thing I must mention to finish off this section is that with all this growth, as in size and speed and agility, and due to nutrition and conditioning and so on, injuries have also increased. And I think if you look at, which I did have a quick look at yesterday, the latest data on the RFU here in the UK, the rate of concussion in the UK has increased by like 400% in the last 3 seasons alone. Now, of course, I think we've all been playing, most people that have played rugby have probably had a bit of a concussion now and then. They didn't even know about it. So nowadays it's a hot topic, but the rates of reporting have gone through the roof. The data I found off the website yesterday was the current concussion rate for RFU players is 10.5 per 1,000 hours, raising 2.5% over the last 3 years. So, for example, if you compare that, what does 10.5 per 1,000 hours mean? If you compare that to boxing, boxing has a concussion rate of 17.5 per 1,000. So it's not too far behind boxing as far as injuries are concerned. It's just clear now that rugby has got a high rate of concussion, more than ever. Is that due to the changing shape and speed of the players? If you think about it, a 20% increase in say height and weight, or let's just say a 20% increase in height equals to around about, like 40% in strength, and around about, and if you times that up, it's like about 70% more inertia. So that's a much greater impact. And you can ask number 9s; they knew that from many years ago. When the number 8 picked up that ball and came around the scrum, it was a big decision to make, because you knew that this inertia that's coming towards you, you had to be very careful how to deal with it. Eh? So yeah, I think through a combination of those factors, rugby's gone professional. Those professional guys they've got more time to train. Everybody, even at club rugby and provincial, and they've got better access to better nutrition, much better strength and conditioning, much better medical health support, so on and so forth. But I would say generally players they may be a little bit bigger, but they're certainly fitter and faster. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, that this is a bit of an education. So when you throw all the science and the passion together, it starts making it very clear why rugby has such a massive following. But for me, the layman, once again here, sevens I find has a different appeal. Can you maybe delve into that a little bit for us? Why do you think sevens has a different appeal?
I guess you probably know this. To exploit that extra space on a normal rugby field by the 14 players, the players need to be fit. They need to be fast. So it's quite common to see a player running from one edge of the pitch all the way to the other end of the pitch to score a try, which is a lot more exciting, a lot more interesting. There's also how can I say, there's much less of a divide between the forwards and backs in sevens. And so the scrums and lineouts, the rucks and the mauls, everybody partakes in them. And let's be very honest, the breakdown in sevens is a lot more fiercer than in 15s. It just happens a lot quicker. So generally at the sevens event, the referee coach of the day would impress upon us. We want that if there's a tackle or if there's a ruck, we want that ball to come out as fast as possible. Now, funny enough, when you went to go and speak to the coaches and the players, that's exactly what they wanted as well. The ball must do the work. So if that's the case, then the game of sevens tends to favor the slightly lighter but far more athletic player. So generally, as a rule, sevens players tend to be a little bit leaner, maybe a little bit more agile than their 15-man counterparts. So you could sort of compare it to a 100-meter sprinter or 400-meter sprinter compared to somebody that's throwing a hammer throw or a javelin or something like that. Probably as strong as each other, but much more, probably a little bit more quicker and agile than the other one. Yeah, I think it's It depends, I guess. I like watching sevens rugby because the ball flows, that's for sure. But there's also nothing like a 15-man game where, given the full chance, you can have the front row spend 80 minutes grinding each other into the ground, and so on and so forth. So for me, it's a bit of a mix. But yep, I love sevens as well.
And I hope this goes for others as well. I'm blaming you for my refound interest in rugby, not only in sevens I've been sort of keeping an eye on in the last while, but 15-man game, because of as I've said quite clearly and categorically, 2 months ago I knew nothing about what was going to happen. I knew there was a World Cup coming, the Cricket World Cup. Didn't know there were two happening. Well, I did sort of, but you got my interest going again, and I thank you for that, and I hope this particular video helps others too. Now, I do know this is going to hopefully air before the final, so I'm going to ask you if you feel like chatting about anything else more.
Yeah. How did I know this is going to be a question, eh? Yeah, we'll see. Again, you've asked me 2 or 3 questions in one. Let me try and remember. So, talking about predictions, okay? The World Cup has actually taught us not to hold predictions, eh? We never, if you look at the bookies, everybody thought Ireland would beat New Zealand, and even the bookies thought France would beat South Africa, and look what's happened. But let's just take a step back. Remember, rugby is a game that's played with and without the ball. So when you look at the game where South Africa played against the French, the Springboks carried. They had far less position. They had far less position and far less field position as well. But they carried the ball far more effectively per player than the French did. The Boks also made more carries that led to more tries than the French. Of course, the ruck was the same sort of rate, the ruck success rate, which was something like 90 odd percent. But then again, the South African scrum had the upper hand of France as well. So when you add all of these aspects to the game, especially including the odd sort of freakish event where there was a knock on from a high ball and Arendse got the ball and there's nobody going to catch him when he's got his tail up. What was quite surprising was that the Springboks went for the high ball against France, and the French weakness under the high ball was very effectively exploited. And that if you take the scrums and the percentage of carries that led to more possession, and then of course the kicks produced two tries. So it was actually a very cleverly well thought out game plan that got the Springboks over France. If you look at the stats, you'll see that France dominated South Africa as far as possession is concerned, and everything really on all the stats. But if you dig down into and do a little bit more analysis on that game, you'll see that South Africa used the ball effectively when they didn't have the ball, and when they had the ball, they put it up in the air and they competed heavily when the ball came down. Right, so I had to put that in because a lot of my colleagues on this thing said it was a lucky game, but it wasn't a lucky game. It was a very astutely coached and run game by the Springboks. As far as the other game was concerned, I thought New Zealand got back to their normal game plan, and there's no other team in the world that once they get onto the front foot and they start spreading that ball wide, the support players to come around to make sure that there's more players to pass to is phenomenal. They are super fit. and they are super keen. The Kiwis are from young kids, are grown up when they're playing rugby to always support. So generally, when you find down in New Zealand at a club game or at a sevens game, there's always 2 or 3 guys standing on the outside that could score the try. And that seems to carry through into the senior rugby as well. How do you beat that? Well, 2 ways. You break it down at source, and then of course you have that pressurized defense, which South Africa have reinvented over the last sort of 8 years or so. A couple of the sort of questions I get about the World Cup. Is it good to have the sort of the second tier, or not the second tier, but the weaker teams in the World Cup? Fossey, you know yourself that sometimes, sometime in your career, you've had the opportunity to play against X, Y, and Z team or X, Y, and Z individual, and it didn't matter what team you were in. You just wanted to play against that individual and test yourself against that individual or that team. So it's the same with guys like I've been to Georgia a number of times, and I've worked with the Georgian Rugby Union, coaching not the Georgian team, but help them with their development of their coaching principles and their methodologies. And for me to follow them, they have to play around about 18 games in the 4 years just to qualify for the Rugby World Cup. A lot of their players don't even make the World Cup because they've spent the last 3 years playing very hard rugby and they don't even get there. So I think it's a bit of a catch-22, really. Yes, I think players, we shouldn't, how can we say, penalize players because they have the chance to play against the mighty All Blacks or the mighty Springboks or whatever it is. But on the other hand, do we want to have 70 and 80 and 90 nil scores? I don't think anybody wants to see that. There are guys that have come up with very good ideas to have sort of 2 tiers, can have more teams and playoffs and relegation and so on and so forth. But I see last week the World Rugby has come out saying, no, they're just going to make the World Cup bigger. It's going to be 24 teams next time. I'm not too sure about that. But what's quite interesting here in Europe, the URC, the United Rugby Championship, which is South Africa and parts of and all the home nations, they're going to have even a bigger event, and they're going to have 2 tiers as well. So I think the logic and the money will follow that, because there's no reason why you can't have 2 tiers, because that second bunch of teams, when you see the Cheetahs coming up to play up here, they play wonderful rugby, and the French love the Cheetahs coming to play over there as well. So it's a good example of how cross-pollination does work. I hope that it does go that way. What else can I tell you about? There's always been a couple of talks about people moving countries or moving from one country to the next. So there's sort of non-nationals playing for other countries. I think that's the modern day. It's a business now. It's a career. You go and live and work in a place for 5 years, you can get a passport. Why not, if you play rugby there for 3 years, and you can then qualify to play for that country? So I don't think there's a problem there. I don't have a problem with that at all. I suppose that's because I've done the same thing. I left South Africa to go to Dubai, and now I'm in the UK, and I'm off to New Zealand. So I'm probably one of those guys. I do think there should be a little bit of a limit, though, so that you do develop your own players as well, like they did have in various tournaments, where you can have maybe 2 overseas players, like they have in the cricket here in the UK. On the odd occasion when there's sun, not like today, but anyway, they'll have 2 international players, and then the rest has to be home developed. So to me, there has to be something like that to balance it up. But then again, most of the European rugby is club rugby, and it's professional rugby. It's not like South Africa or New Zealand, where it's mainly regional rugby. Australia, here it's all run by money and benefactors, and so they're going to employ whoever they want, whoever they can afford to win the game. Because the more wins you have, the higher you up in the league, you get more money. So that's just the way it is. Yeah, and then you asked the question about who's going to win. Well, who knows? Like I've said, I've learned very fast. My very first two predictions for the quarterfinals were wrong, so I've kept quiet now. Although I must say, based on form over the last 3 or 4 years, you have to say New Zealand are going to fold Argentina. Although I've got to be honest, Michael Cheika has done amazing things. He's a fantastic coach. He's done amazing things with the team. They've had 1 or 2 unfortunate injuries, but they've got their heads screwed on now, and they're confident. But it's going to be a big ask for RG, I'm sure. But I would say New Zealand is going to fold Argentina, and then I'm without a doubt the bookies are going to clean England up for breakfast. I wouldn't like to say by how much, but I'm just looking forward to them dominating every sector of play. So we don't have an example like when it was George Mark Cueto scoring in the corner, and to this day he talks about getting the ball down before his foot was out. Absolute nonsense. He was out, and that's the way it is. So we don't want any excuses in this game. What we do want is we want South Africa to play their game, make sure they've got front foot forward, use the kick judiciously, but basically steamroller over every single phase of the game, and I'm sure they will do that. So to me, it's going to be a New Zealand-South Africa final, and who knows what's going to happen as far as that's concerned. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to spook anything. I just think that it's a great opportunity for all of us to get our brides ready and to make sure that you have the right spiritus with you, and have the family glued around the TV and enjoy the evening, because it's going to be an absolutely cracking semi-final and final. It's well scripted, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's well scripted. And thank you. I really put that last one in there as a bit of a wind up. I didn't expect you to go that far, but yeah, you answered that superbly. It's well scripted. It is. So I'll just qualify in saying this is going to go out after the semis. So we'll all know if we can. Yes, we'll all know if we can slate Dr. Steve, or if we can say he knows what he's talking about. I know he knows what he's talking about. I promise you, I know he knows what he's talking about. So I'm sort of half and half thinking that that's more or less the way it's going to go. Of course, I would wish for an all Southern Hemisphere final. Including the Listerine team with the blue stripes, that one. I would wish for that. Anyway, I don't know if it's going to be that way. And if you have anything more to say to us on the rugby front, on the flying front, on the design front, on any front, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I am going to say we can call this quits for the day, and I'm hoping, if I look at my calendar quickly, that this will be airing on Wednesday the 25th. So it's before the final, and that'll be terrific then. So from me, I'm going to say thank you so much, and we'll leave it over to you for the last few words.
It's difficult for me not to talk. This is a passion of mine, and I can talk forever on refereeing and rugby, but I also have another appointment now. I've got to go up to Stuart's Butcher, which is up in Stoke, to go and get my latest order of boerewors. So I want to go and get that. ready for the tonight. We're not braaiing, but tomorrow we're having a lekker braai, and so I've got to make sure that all my nodige salads and meat is all correct and ready. So that's my responsibility for today. There's no other responsibility. So isn't that lekker? That's how life should be. Don't tell my wife, okay? But anyway, that's what I'm saying.
Oh yes, I'm also gonna go get wors today, and for sure. And I've got the maize meal already. So pop and wors tonight. So yeah, you're off to go and fetch your wors, and we'll go and fetch our wors. That's if this weather.
Yeah.
Scary. Anyway, that's why we won't be braaiing tonight either.
Yeah.
But just before I go, I want to say to our viewers, thank you so much. If you have any more questions, and yes, we will have Dr. Steve back another day to speak about other things or to speak more rugby, but put your questions down here in the comment section. Be free to put your and what I will do is all the links you've sent me, I'm going to include in the description box. So all those links you will see in the description box, and they should be live in there.
Fantastic.
I do thank you tremendously, because you sent me a terrific document. All the preparation you put in for this, but this is the way we've got to know you. You are always on top of your game. No wonder you are the best ref that there is on the field while you're reffing. Oops, sorry. Anyway, you sent me a little meme about the, I don't know if I may use those memes, but I might sneak it in the corner here somewhere. The meme that you sent me of the ref with the in the optometrist's checklist. You need to have your eyes tested. Anyway, you sent it to me. That's the only reason why I'll use it.
Yeah, use it for sure.
For sure. So to all of you folk out there, thank you so much for enjoying this with me and Dr. Steve. And really, if you've got comments and questions, feel free. But until we meet again, until we speak again, God bless.